You're listening to the Save the Marriage podcast. Your marriage can be saved and strengthened if you have the right information. Join Dr. Lee Baucom as he explores ways for you to improve your relationship and your life, starting right now.
This morning I was out playing pickleball, and my partner, who just kind of ended up my partner because our paddles happen to be in the stack. If you're familiar with pickleball, you know that it's kind of a social sport, and you line up for paddles, and you kind of choose sides. If you're in an open play, some people have their teams. I often play with my wife. Some other people have their consistent partners, but in this particular hour and a half at where I play, it's called open play because you end up playing with whoever happens to be there. They do have a setting of what your range of skill is, but beyond that, it just happens to be who puts their paddles in a stack of four. And so then it's 2-on-2 based on, trying to figure out who would play well together, but in some ways it's just kind of this random event, right? And so this morning I'm playing with this person that I've seen around. I haven't played with a lot. And we were getting stomped. And I'll tell you why we were getting stomped. He kept trying to do this wacky hit, and it was never going in. I mean, it was hitting the net. It was going off to the side. Sometimes it would bounce off his paddle and go behind him. I mean, it just made no sense. And I was watching him do it. And what I realized was it didn't matter what the ball was that was coming at him. He kept taking this one swing at it. And so finally, when it was my serve, I was holding the ball and I walked over and I said, What's going on? We're going to lose because you keep doing that same move. What's going on? And he said, oh, it's this really cool hit. I saw it on YouTube. And I said, do you know how it fits in your game? And he said, well, I just figured it'd be a cool thing to do. So now, is it a big deal for me to lose a game of pickleball, even if the person is just not taking it seriously? No, not a big deal. But did it help us, and this is the important part, get to the goal we had, which in pickleball is to make it to 11 before your opponents do, right? And so his particular hit was not helping us get there at all. So let me give you another similar example. And by the way, I promise this is going to get back to your marriage and your efforts to save your marriage in just a second, but just indulge me for a minute. So for a number of years, as you may have heard from other podcasts, I did jujitsu. And so sometimes there would be this person who was trying to do, again, some technique, some approach, some skill that we had never learned where I was going, where we were not using that approach. And sometimes I would say, where'd that come from? And usually it was after I had defeated them and had them tap to me. And they would say, oh, I saw this really cool thing on YouTube, so I wanted to use it. And so here's the thing. There are a lot of things that look really cool on YouTube or on social media, Facebook or Twitter or wherever else you might gather your information. But that doesn't mean that they fit for you or that they should fit into any approach that you should use. Now, do you see where we're pivoting to? Because what I've noticed, and I keep seeing this repeatedly in people I'm working with, that suddenly find themselves at a fail point that they don't have to be at. Here's what often happens. So they have found me some way, maybe listening to this exact podcast or maybe reading one of my books or something like that. And so they found me and they've decided that they're going to follow my Save the Marriage program. And they're making progress. And I see it all the time. They're making progress. And I think, okay, we've got this. And then they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, everything has fallen apart. Now, there are times when no matter what you do, and I just want to be very clear about this because I don't want you to hear me say everybody who is not successful has made this mistake. But so there are times when no matter what you do, no matter what effort you put in, you have a spouse who is so committed to ending the relationship that you cannot get the ship to turn, right? But many times people are making great progress. And then all of a sudden they have a disaster. Everything falls apart and they just find themselves in a horrible place. And so part of what I've noticed is that there is a through line of what happens in these situations. They have really good efforts, meaning they use a good approach and they really invest in trying it and put forth the effort. So they're actually doing the work of saving their marriage. And then they start doing questionable effort, not meaning that they're working less hard. Sometimes they're even working harder, but they're following questionable advice. And so this mistake often happens as people are making progress or as they are getting frustrated about not making progress. Those are kind of the 2 points of this process. A lot of times I can talk to people and say, I know you don't see any movement right now, but here's the thing I've learned. Right now, if you're not moving in a negative direction, you should see that as a positive sign. Now, there are other times when even though there is some negative pushback, they can turn that around. They can get it to a place they want to, but they have to find some ways of following good advice, not questionable advice or even bad advice. And there is plenty of that to go around. And so the question that often pops in their head is, what now? What more? When I've talked with people, they are making their connection efforts and they are seeing results of that. They're making their change efforts and they're seeing results of that. And then they ask the question, okay, so what more do I do? And I'm like, why are you wanting to do more? Because what we're talking about are the things that restore a relationship and keep them going. So in my own relationship, we work on staying connected. I work in my own personal life of changing and growing. And so I'm following my own tenets, and we see our relationship on that common path of being a we. So creating that path is something that we both commit to, which means that we are following our own advice after being married for over 36 years. I mean, after having a happy marriage for that length of time, we still put in those principles because they work, but they also are the approach that gets you to a good relationship. The core problem is that people need to keep doing what is working instead of trying this new and maybe crazy new path, right? That just pops up for them somewhere. And the algorithms are finding you. If you're doing a search and finding information on how to save a marriage, your algorithm is happy to show you more. And Google doesn't care if it's accurate information or useful information. It's just information. And that's the same true. I've seen many people they ask AI to help them with their marriage. First of all, AI has never been in a relationship. And second, AI is pulling from a lot of sources, some of which are not helpful. In fact, they are counterproductive, but AI doesn't care. It's absorbed all that and is taking it in. So whether it's a Google search or whatever search engine you like, Edge or whatever you're typing it into, or wherever you're getting it, it doesn't mean that it is useful information. That is just not part of the game. It's information. And so let me just tell you a little bit more back to pickleball, right? So if you're losing, one of the worst things you can do is really crunch down and try to do trick shots and try to play a different game. You should be working to play a more accurate, more careful game, if anything. This morning, I was playing with another guy, and he and I have played before plenty of times together. We were down 0-6. And after the game, he came up to me. We won, by the way, 11-6. So we came back, and he came up. He said, "Man, your soft game today was spot on." And he said, "We were down, and that's really hard to play that soft game." And it is, because you're all tense and you're wanting to get the points. But let me go the other way. I've watched people who lose matches because they're up, and then they start trying to be fancy, right? Instead of playing the game they know to be, they get all fancy. Now, I am not opposed to people trying to improve their game. I'm doing it every single match. I'm thinking through, how do I want to play this? So it's not about whether you're trying to improve your play. It's whether you take a drastically different path, whether you're winning or losing, right? That both of those points can get you dragged into it. And so part of my thing is to keep doing what's working. If my serves are working, I'm going to keep serving that way. If my defending the line is working, I'm going to defend that way. If my returns are working, I'm going to work that from that place, right? I'm going to return just the same way I've been doing because I'm playing this consistently. And one of the things that I've noticed when people start pulling in this questionable advice is suddenly there's no inconsistency in their game. And let me put quotes on that because I don't think that what you're doing is playing a game and saving your marriage, although there are approaches that make you seem to think that you're playing a game with your spouse. And let me tell you right now, those are bad approaches all the way across the board. So let me first distinguish for a moment kind of my approach. My approach is based on research around what makes relationships work and what makes people grow and transform. That's been my life work. I was trained as a research oriented therapist. I was trained as a transformational coach. And I bring those together to ask the question, what makes a relationship great and what makes us capable of growing in our life? Those are my big questions. So I talk about the 3 C's of connect, change, and create. Connect with your spouse, change yourself, create a new path. Those are the 3 core elements of my approach. And what we're doing is trying to create connection, create change in yourself that brings to the whole relationship a transformation to bring you to a better place. That is my whole approach. So everything I look at comes from that lens. I'm not going to tell you how to not change and not connect or trick your spouse into thinking you've changed or trick your spouse into doing something. That is not my approach. My approach is to make it for real connection and for real change, leading to for real transformation along that new path to being a we. That's, in a nutshell, my whole approach. Connect, change, create. Connect, change, create. And you hear me say that over and over again. And yes, I have specific techniques and approaches. I have frameworks, I have techniques, I have understandings to help people put those into practice because I want you to put them into practice. So over and over, I watch people who do that and have great success. I've watched it for decades now of people transforming their relationships from around the world now that I get to do that on the internet for the last couple of decades, last 25 years, to be honest. I've been doing that with people around the world, and it's great to watch how it works everywhere. Now, let's hold that against what some other approaches are. And let me first say, I am not saying there is no other good advice out there. In fact, I'm the first to point at it. I've interviewed great people on this podcast who have great approaches to working on relationships. And I think that there are a great many complementary approaches that fit together. And so it's kind of like creating a coordinated outfit, right? You put it on, you go, oh, that all fits together, as opposed to having, really jarring outfit that does not go at all together, and you're like, that those are just opposite, right? Well, that's the other advice. The advice that I want to warn you against is this other advice that is prominently out there, and it usually falls into kind of 2 big categories. There are lots of subcategories, but 2 big categories. The first is manipulation. It's basically, how do you manipulate your spouse, right? Reverse psychology, the no contact rule, which doesn't work because it completely wrecks connection. The different ways of doing, NLP or some other approach. And let me just say, NLP is a communication tool that is rife with people thinking you use that to manipulate rather than communicate better. So I'm pointing to the dangerous side of that. So there are lots of approaches out there that are all about manipulation and fooling your spouse. That doesn't work. It may be about making your spouse think that you don't care about them to make them jealous. That's manipulation. Or it may be about somehow tricking them in your language pattern. That's manipulation. Or it may be somehow about whenever they say something you agree with it. That was reverse psychology a lot of times. And all of these approaches that just do not get you anywhere. That's the first big group. The second one is what I call the blame and shame. And the blame and shame either set you up to feel bad about yourself, feeling that you're being blamed for how you've been or shamed for how you've done things, or for you to use a blame and shame on your spouse. Again, not real helpful. We can be motivated by blame or shame. Rarely does it work on us changing someone else, and rarely is it a long-term solution for yourself, right? So lately I've had a lot of people come in and saying, hey, I think that I have had the nice guy syndrome. And then when I ask what that means, they're like, I've just been real too helpful. And they give me this mishmash of stuff where they just have felt blame and shame. And my question is, so what do you want to move towards? The mean guy approach? I mean, maybe you need to be looking at how you communicate and what you're communicating out there. But just to put that all under the I've been too nice, I don't think that gets you anywhere. And so a lot of those are subtle and not so subtle blame shame games. And then there are others who recommend that you blame and shame your spouse, whether it's from a religious perspective or a cultural perspective or any other perspective, and try to get them to work on things from that place, right? So notice you're trying to get somebody, yourself or somebody else, to work on it when you're feeling bad about yourself and shameful, versus trying to build a connection, trying to build a bridge to a better place, trying to actually find some true transformation and growth for yourself. That's the approach that actually is beneficial. So what does that all mean? Well, I want to propose to you an idea that part of what you and all of us need to be doing in our lives is gatekeeping. So gatekeeping is deciding what you're going to allow into your vicinity, right? So imagine you got the gate around your house and you're going to say, am I going to let that in or not? Am I going to keep out the wild animals or let them run rampant in my yard? That's gatekeeping, right? And so to use that in information, gatekeeping means that you're looking for good advice that matches what you're doing. And you're not going to get sucked into the YouTube video that tells you how to do that secret technique, or the ebook that tells you that, or the course that tells you that. And you're going to ask the question, how does this measure up to a useful approach? And now, if you find something that builds on the approach that you've taken. So let's assume that you have heard me talk and you say, you're right. We have a broken connection. We hit the pause button long ago. We have a broken connection. I haven't been growing as well as I could be. I need to be working on that. And we never established being a we. Okay. So you've got those three things missing. And then you look at any other information that comes your way, a book or anything else, and you ask the question, are they working on connection? Are they working on change? Are they working on creating that new path? And if so, pay attention. You may still decide that that's just how it looks from the outside, and once you get in, it's actually manipulation and shame, but at least that matches the first grouping. Now, if you love the manipulation game, good luck to you. Please don't use my approach. I don't want to be a part of that. If you like the shame blame game, good luck to you. I don't believe in that. Please do not use my approach. If you decide to use my approach, I'm telling you, you are using a connection approach, a change approach, right? And so you want to then use that as the litmus test for other pieces of information. Is this helping? Is an idea from this author helping? So John Gottman talks about bids. That fits into connection really well. And so there are lots of other pieces out there that can fit into that, but you've got to have some litmus test to decide, does it pass or not? Right. And so the gatekeeping is saying, can that come into my capacities? Is that something I need to bring in and explore? And if not, I'm not going to. If you say, yeah, but I'm making great progress and now I need the what more, right? I need to rev this up. You may not need to rev it up. You may need to allow it to grow, right? So let's go back. Let's say you're making progress. And I think this is the idea that people have. You're making progress. And so it's kind of like you're trying to grow some plant. and you got the fertilizer and the right sources on it, and you're watering it, and you're watching it kind of grow. And you decide, well, if a little fertilizer helped, a lot will help a lot more, right? And so you go to find these other ideas to amp it up, to ramp it up. And all you're doing as you're putting them down is you're burning the roots and killing the plant. It could not sustain that. And many times it's almost like you were stomping on it anyway. Few weeks ago, I had a person who came to me and said, yeah, I don't know what happened. I was using your approach and it failed. And I said, well, tell me more of what happened. And so they were using my approach for a couple of months, and they were rebuilding connection, and they were, getting along so well with the spouse, and they were able to do some things together and have important conversations, and the person was working on growing. And then they went, okay, now I got to figure out the next step. And so they found this thing that you may have heard of on the internet called the no contact rule, where for 30 days you have zero contact with your spouse to make them jealous and to make them think they're going to lose you and to draw them back in by manipulation. And they sure enough did the no contact rule, 30 days. At the end of 30 days, they tried to initiate contact, and the spouse said, hey, I thought you had decided that not to work on this. The divorce papers are in the mail. And they came to me and they're like, your program didn't work. And I'm like, you didn't do my program did work. You bailed on that and went with a different approach. Those two things do not go together. So just because somebody said this will help save your marriage doesn't mean you can lump it in. And that's the problem with that gatekeeping. Just because information is marked as save your marriage does not mean that it fits with any other piece of that. You have to judge that. You have to be the gatekeeper. So what is this all about? After all of this time, what is it about? Gatekeeping what's coming your way. Making sure that you understand how the information you're allowing in fits for you. Back to my pickleball with my friend with the wacky hit. I said, let's just play this straight like you usually play, right? Let's just go to your basics. Let's go back to that. And we were able to work through that. But that's because he decided, and we decided together, to gatekeep what was useful and keep out what was not. So my suggestion here is to be a better gatekeeper. Make sure that you're looking for information that aligns with what you believe to be true about saving your marriage, not just because somebody says this will save your marriage, but because it fits the litmus test. Does it deal with connection? Does it deal with change? Does it deal with creating a new path? And remember, change is about changing yourself. If it fits there, then it may be something that will augment your approach, that will help you understand your approach. If it does not, lock it out. If you need help with this, if you need a basic point to start from, please come visit me at savethemarriage.com. That's savethemarriage.com. Look into my system. And while you're at it, go ahead and do a couple of things. If you decide to get it, go ahead and join my virtual coaching program, my VIP program. I offer you a free week of that. You have to sign up for it. I don't force it on you. You have to sign up. I try to be as straightforward and clear with people as I can be. I'm not going to force you into that. You have to sign up. If you decline it, it is the only time I offer it for free in that process. The other thing is we're offering right now a get started session with the coach on top of the VIP virtual coaching, a get started session with one of my coaches. It's like a 15-20 minute session with one of my coaches to make sure you're headed in the right direction. No cost or obligation of that. Just we want to make sure you're heading in the right direction. So the starting point for that is to grab the system. You can find that at savethemarriage.com. That's savethemarriage.com. This is Lee Baucom wishing you the best as you work to save your marriage.
You've been listening to Save the Marriage podcast. For more information and help, please visit us at savethemarriage.com.